Okay. We'll call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 4:34. And we'll begin with, I think it's the Pledge of Allegiance is our first thing. So flag is this way. Stand and join me in the pledge. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then we need a roll call. We are present other than Diane, Celeste, Carlos, and Clancy. So we have a quorum of 5. We will begin.
Ken.
Oh, and Ken, yeah, and Ken Rivas. We're expecting Trustee Caffrey to join us shortly. So we can begin with the. Is it the approval? Is there any public comment? I'm looking at the minutes, that's why I'm confused. No public comment, so the first action is to review and approve the minutes from March 17th, 2026.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Yeah. Sorry, I'll get closer next time. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
You know, I'm going to hold on this because I don't think with Todd not present that we probably should wait to have a quorum of people that were at the meeting to approve the minutes.
Yeah. Good thinking.
Okay, all right. So we'll wait till we have our 6th member for a quorum on that. And that brings us to the information discussion item. Mr. Tedeschi, you have the slide deck. We're going to start with the introductory diagnostic tool from Smarter School Spending. We did this briefly. Our meeting last time spent more time on the second interim report, and we decided to come back and bring it a little bit more in depth, and then we'll get to the general and administrative expenditures and budget development process. Mr. Tedeschi, you want to go ahead?
Okay, good evening, everybody. As Bill introduced, our first item here is to discuss the GFOA initial assessment tool. And the GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association. And back in my time at the county, their real focus was on municipalities, cities, and counties. And now they have branched out to really start to dig into the school finance world. I believe they're centered in Chicago. And they have a program called the Smarter School Spending for Student Success program that brings districts together to really kind of look at the budget process, look for efficiencies and the best way to spend money. And as part of that program, one of the initial steps to evaluate your own district is to go through this checklist. I don't know if everybody has had a chance to look at it. I filled it out, but I think the thought was that maybe as a committee we can kind of go through it and look at the questions and maybe do a self-assessment with the committee based on what our members know to be able to score the questions as they're presented. So we also have the 2 other items. We'll get to those. And just so you know, as we are now in here using this screen, we have the computer running it over there. So my goal will be to put as much on the slides as possible, the data, the reports, everything, so that we can get through it that way instead of having multiple documents that we have to switch back and forth to. So as you can see, it's a little harder, it's over my shoulder, but I will do my best here. So the tool provides a list of capacity indicators. As we look at it, it's like, where are you and will this program really work for you? And this Smarter School Spending program actually has what they call an alliance of multiple school districts that participate, that really commit to the program, that bring their educational leaders, their superintendent, and their business people all together to take part into this pretty significant undertaking to become part of the Smarter School Spending Alliance. So the first section of the tool really gets into planning and preparing, and it's basically a set of questions that you go through to really determine whether you as a district have the capacity to participate in the program. And hi, Celeste. Hello. Just maybe take a minute here for Celeste to get settled. So we're just getting started with the checklist. And our first question is, does your district have the capacity already, or does it need to hire, build, or partner? And check the box that most describes your district. And so it's a scoring from 1, meaning we have no way to do this, to 4, almost like we're already doing it. And basically, the first question is, do you have the sufficient and experienced staff to manage a complex strategic planning process that involves setting instructional priorities, identifying cost-saving options, and engaging stakeholders and community, and communicating that strategically? And so I've been here since July, and I'm really still working on a deep assessment of my department and the district as a whole to undertake this budget development process. And we have a pretty robust process as it is, but I think there's always areas to look into, to change, to maybe kind of look into making improvements to how you do it. And so with this first, do we have sufficient and experienced staff? I would say yes, that we do. That really, and Lacey is sitting here next to me as one of them, I believe we have 4 CPAs on staff now that are part of the finance department that work on any number of areas involved in budget development, reporting, and all of the pieces that go into it. So with this item, I don't know, getting comments from the group based on what you know about our district and my department. I don't know where, before I kind of get into what I have scored these items, I think we should maybe take any thoughts from the committee first, and then I can kind of go into what I think. If there are not a lot of thoughts from the committee, that's fine as well. I can go into it. So does anybody, Todd, do you have a thought?
Just more of a question. What does did you rank it a 4?
Let's see. I ranked this one a 3. Yes.
Would it be helpful if I just emailed it to everyone so they have it in front of them? I have it on my computer right now. Shall I just email it to the
With the
committee?
Sure. I mean,
yes,
it's
with
been-
the rankings.
It's been, of what, it was part of the agenda last
yeah.
time, so it is there, but you can go on the website and find what I have.
I just don't remember your ranking.
Right.
I can just send it right now, so that's it in front.
Yeah,
Is that fine?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
My only thought is things like setting instructional priorities are beyond your department. And
Right.
so while you have a good read on that, on the things that your department manages, where do the other departments come into play?
Right. That's a good question, because that's absolutely something we do not do as the finance department, but my role on our cabinet is to promote that, to push for that, to identify that. And then our role will be, once we have some instructional priorities, to really assign the financial data, the budget data to those priorities so we can kind of get information out, which is probably why I gave it a 3 as opposed to a 4, in that getting to that phase is something, and you'll see it in further questions down the road, something that we as a team, as a district, will continue to work on.
So just one question on the 3. It says that, in the process of training staff to manage effectively. It sounded like, you talked about 4 CPAs on staff. It sounded like you might be leaning closer to a 4 than a 3, at least on that side of things.
Right. If I could give it a 3.5, I probably would. But I think the idea of the strategic planning process, we're working in that direction as a district. It's not just our staff. Our staff is pretty well versed in the budget development side, but including this concept of educational priorities and strategic planning, that's where we will need, and my staff will need some training to bring it all together.
That's good. I think three's definitely fair.
I would agree. I just also want to say, I think that the district, the board is dedicated to moving toward this new strategic planning that would ideally better integrate finance and instructional things. So the thing about involves setting instructional priorities, identifying cost savings. I wasn't part of the last strategic planning process here, and so how that works with setting priorities and funding is really embedded in the LCAP, but I think you were on the right place with 3 or 4 at this.
Okay, so we'll move to the next question. And this question is the necessary information and knowledgeable staff to project with reasonable accuracy expenditures and revenues for the next 3 to 5 years to determine how much cost savings are needed to fund instructional priorities. And so you can see each grade has kind of an explanation there, and I think the necessary information and knowledgeable staff is there, and we have that there. And so from a capacity standpoint, I rank that a 4 because we have what we need to do it. We just need to get on the track to do it. Any thoughts from the group on that one?
I mean, so Connor, I agree with you directionally for sure. I mean, I think we're coming from a place where I think we maybe didn't. And I think the addition of you and the team, I think we're to a point where I lean your way too, that you are, definitely getting closer to being that 4,
Right.
if not a 4 now.
Any other thoughts?
I would agree. I think we're in a good place getting there. I think the projecting with accuracy next 3 to 5 years is getting difficult for almost anybody with the federal environment and the questions in regard to what may be happening with property taxes and all that kind of thing. But with reasonable accuracy, we've been doing it for long enough, I think.
What I appreciate about this question is the idea of forward planning for 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we haven't had that up to this point, at least during my time on the board. So I like that as a goal that we're thinking about. How do we project? And maybe our revenue is harder to project, but expenses, no one can predict perfectly, but we can at least make a plan for the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. It's hard to foresee what funding would be coming from the state to fund certain programs for certain initiatives and things that they're doing. But I feel like, we do have good information and good people to do that work. And I think with coming from this committee and direction from the board, I think there's also things to consider about enrollment is a big part of that, where we're not necessarily funded based on our enrollment, but we have expenditures that are impacted by enrollment. If we get more students, we need more teachers and staff. If we have fewer students, we make adjustments that way. So looking out a couple extra years, I mean, like I've mentioned before, I look at birth rates from 4 years ago in Santa Barbara area, South County, to see how many TK students, if there's a big growth, and we can probably see more coming. So we are digging into more of those stats, more of those things to try to really get a good look into the 3 and 4 years out. And I will say, when we do a budget or our financial statements, the state requires just 2 years. But I think when we look at longer term strategic planning, especially when it involves declining enrollment, we need to look beyond the 2 years, with the caveat, with each year, your estimates and projections become a little less reliable because of just so many unknowns. Yeah, Celeste.
So I know that over the past 2 years, which is kind of the timeline I've been involved, that we had issues projecting our staffing needs, and that has really hurt morale in our district. And I'm curious, I mean, I think we've heard loud and clear that we want to get to a point where we don't have unnecessary rifts. So when you think about this capacity, I know we recently signed up with a vendor to integrate our financial and HR systems, but is that part of improving our ability to project our staffing needs.
Right. That particular item is really focused on what do we have and is it in the right place and we're accounting for it correctly. And then the next logical step will be taking that and really using how many of these do we have? We have a good number. What's paying for them? How do we account for them? Do we need that many? Do we shift funding? Like all of those things. The better data we have in our system that we're using will allow us to make those projections better. Yeah, Derek.
In regards to staffing, man, I'm loud on here. In regards to staffing, there was a decision made last year, kind of near the end of the everything, that significantly impacted staffing at high schools, the course takes. So I don't think it's actually that we've had trouble determining what the staffing should be. I think we just that threw a big wrench in things, and I just don't think people understood, including ourselves, how much of an impact that was going to have on staffing. So I just want to throw it out there. I don't, as long as we're on the same page and thinking about down the future how we're going to staff and not try to change things last minute, or, like, that should just be part of our planning. So I don't blame any one person for that. I mean, I think it was a good try, and it definitely helped us with the budget. Just had a very big impact. So I just wanted to say that out as we're discussing this.
No, and that's a very good point, because I think if we can project well for 3 to 5 years, those surprises really shouldn't happen. What can change it through the course of negotiations and changes to the collective bargaining agreement can impact staffing choices that are made, which would impact changes to our projections. But if we constantly have the 3 to 5 years that, okay, if we have to adjust 2 years from now, we know now as we move forward. So we're trying to eliminate the surprises for everybody so that we can be open, people can hear about the conversation that we're talking about for 2 years from now. So I think that's a very good point, trying to eliminate the surprises. Yeah, Celeste.
And I guess basically to add on to what Principal Holdren was saying, I think this also goes back to the planning and prepare piece and the board's role in setting priorities in the strategic plan, and our decision going forward about high school credits. Having much more clarity from the board.
And I think
so that it's not a surprise for the board.
Right.
Yeah.
And establishing those goals and priorities for what those are will kind of guide those decisions through the process. Okay. And the next one is regards to dedicated staff, tools, and processes in place to determine stakeholder support at key stages of the strategic and financial planning process and make adjustments to the process based on stakeholder feedback. I'm not sure that stakeholder is the correct word to use anymore, but we'll go with that. And I ranked this a 3, not because we don't have the dedicated staff and tools in place, but I think processes surrounding the financial planning and the priorities and the strategic planning are the pieces that would make it a 4.
No, we're there. I don't see the right ranking in these 4 options, because I think we have the necessary staff, but we do not have the right tools and processes for our stakeholder support. We don't honestly engage with people in a meaningful way. We send out a survey, and if we get close to 1,000 responses from 20,000 families, 18,000 families, we say, look, this is what our families think. Mm-hmm. That isn't enough to me. I was at a listening session for teachers where admin talked at them for 40 minutes of the hour listening session. Supposedly we have the process to listen to people. We don't actually. And so that's where this to me is going to be one of the biggest changes that needs to occur, and is going to be a major shift for, I think, a lot of other departments and how they try to do things.
Right. So I would, just in my limited experience here, I wouldn't disagree with you. I would say that we probably have the tools. Are we using them to the best, most effective way to engage people? And I think that's kind of the piece of how do we make that better? How do we really get that? And I think groups like this are one way of doing that. It's a small group, but we all represent different parts of the population to get that information out there. But I think this is an important one, because I think that's getting that information to people that are impacted by the decisions is very important. So, yeah, thank you, York. Appreciate that.
I would say that one of the important pieces here too is identifying. I think one of the things in the process is to determine stakeholder support. The question for me is, how do we determine what, and stakeholder, you're right, it's a loaded word. So I've been learning to use education partners. It's ironic. My point being that a strategic planning process that deals with goals and visions and all those things will have to engage education partners at every level. And so that's one of the things I think that will be a pressure point to say, are we getting the right people? Are we getting enough? Do we really know who they should be? I'll also say that my experience in this realm of working on finance, strategic plans in other districts and gathering input from the community is that the percentage of turnout is never what the district really wants or believes. But I think the idea of knowing who we want to get and make the efforts to get out there and do it is an important piece.
And I've seen that firsthand since I've been here. I started my tour of going to the sites and trying to speak with teachers and listen and kind of get some information from the people that are out at the sites. And it's been effective when I have people show up. So I've been to a couple schools and I just offered, come at lunchtime or before school. It's optional. Come talk to me if you want to have one or two. But I actually went to a staff meeting at one of our high schools, and it was a full auditorium of people. And the great part about it is people felt comfortable enough to tell me how they really feel. And they're not happy about something, they would tell me that. And so at a couple spaces, that was important for me to hear, and I'm going to continue that. I got through our secondary schools, planning to get through our elementary schools, and then maybe tour back around to the secondary schools. And it's not a symbolic gesture on my part. It's really trying to get input and understand where some of the pain points are. What do people want to know? What questions do they have? And it's not always pleasant for me because I'm not the most liked, position in the district, and I understand that. But I think the more I can work through that, and I think that's just my small little area of the district. But I think as a district as a whole, establishing those relationships and making sure people feel comfortable speaking their mind and how they feel, that they don't necessarily have to come to a board meeting to do that. They have that opportunity with different administrators at different times. Any more on that one? So the next group of questions are the setting instructional priorities. And I think this was an area, this is the second set. This is the area that I think some work still needs to be done, and it's in process, and we're going to really I'm going to be focusing on that, pressing on some of the members of cabinet. I've mentioned it a little bit in our all managers meeting yesterday as people are developing their budgets to really focus in on identifying these instructional priorities for us as a district. And for each school individually, for each department individually, what are your priorities? What are you working on? What do you value most? Started here talking about value-based budgeting. And so it's like, what do you value most? And it may be different from school to school, but as a district, we really have to put that together in some form of a strategic plan. So the first question would be, do we have the dedicated time to identify the critical elements of each of its instructional priorities and the information and staff with the capacity to estimate with reasonable accuracy the additional 3 to 5 year costs needed to effectively implement these priorities? And so this is a space where we need to work We have a lot of work to do in this space. I graded this one a 2. Like we can make the time to do this, but I think there needs to be some guidance from cabinet, from the district out to say, hey, we need to work on this together as a district. It's not just 6 or 7 of us in the one room doing this. We really need to engage our principals, our administrators, our bargaining units, everybody involved in this. So I think this was one of the areas that I saw as a need for us to improve and really get to. So any thoughts on this? You can take a second to read the responses. Yeah, Derek.
I feel like I agree with you that we've struggled to figure out and stick with our instructional priorities, because as things come from above me, I don't know if it's board, district, whatever, it feels like we have a plan and then something comes up and then we got to handle this. And then we have a plan and something comes up, we got to handle this. So I'd love to see us, this is about more than just finances, right? But I'd love for us to prioritize what we're going to prioritize and move forward. I think we hear the same things all the time. We hear about PLCs. I know we hear a lot about PD, but then we get distracted from those. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that one.
Right, yeah, I appreciate that. York, did you have a follow-up?
I totally agree. I think this is the biggest sticking point, right? We have the 4 board priorities. And so we should be trying to figure out how everything we do through like the instructional framework, roadmap, the ABCs that Ed Services put together, how all of that connects to and supports those 4 board priorities, how all of our PD connects to those, how we're spending related to all of those, because I think ultimately we want to figure out, okay, literacy is important. How much are we spending on it? Where are we doing that work? Where is it most effective? That's the $1 million question, right? But getting all of those things aligned is going to be what makes our district become great.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a lot of things are coming together here in this conversation. We're talking about how do we expect the finance department to link to the goals and objectives when we're not even all aligned up with that? And everything keeps coming back to that, moving up to the broad view of how do we create this strategic vision that we're all supporting that we can then link together. So I agree with your statement, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. But even within the 4 board priorities, when you talk about literacy, there's got to be multiple priorities under literacy. It's such a big overarching thing that with each department, like, you know, student family services, what are you doing what are some of your priorities to get us to that point of, you know, shrinking the achievement gap and like all those things that we're doing. And then our job will be working with them to make sure that it's reflected in the budget, that we can get reports out that says, okay, here's what we've been spending on literacy and here's the buckets that it was done. And so kind of get that out there. Is this effective? And then the board can assess, you know, where we are, what the spending has been, and is it the right direction? Do we need to shift gears from this program to that program? So all of that is important. This is an area, but it all starts in, you know, we have the board priorities, but from there really kind of defining more detailed priorities that the principals can better understand what's expected of them, and their contribution to that is they're going to help us set those priorities of what they think is effective and working and is important.
You know, there's a phrase that pops up, particularly in number 2, where you've put it. It talks about the district's most critical reforms. And that's what we come down to. I think that's that whole strategic plan. Do we even know what our most critical reforms are? We have information about how MTSS is dealing with Tier 1 instruction and all these type of things. But there's so much data that we can look at that all tells us different things. What are the most critical and what's the first step? So one of the most significant parts of acting through a strategic plan is having the priority order of what you tackle first in order to get there. So, all done. Good stuff.
Okay. So the next section is paying for the priorities. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but this is also a super critical component from the budgetary standpoint, because there is a limited amount of money that we have. And what do we value, and how are we going to pay for those, and what are the priorities, and what programs need to be put in place, and staffing to help us achieve those priorities. So the first one would be to understand the cost savings options successfully using other districts and necessary data and staff to identify an initial list of potential cost saving options that makes further consideration for your district. And I think this is an important one. I think this one is an area, time permitting, that we should get to. And I ranked this a 2. It's understanding, really getting into the cost-saving items, because our budget is in a place where we need to start really, I mean, we have been doing some of this work. We have kind of picked what we consider to be the low-hanging fruit, but I think there's more work to be done there. And I think this really is important for us to kind of look around to see what are some buckets, areas to look at for cost-saving opportunity. So, any thoughts on this one?
My only question on this is the question's asking about looking at other districts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree that you and the Finance Committee, and we're all looking for these cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, are we comparing what we do versus, other districts and successful districts?
So we haven't yet. Our focus has really been looking internally at ourselves and what we determine that we think as a district is impactful. What are some things that aren't? What do we value? Going through that, that's the first step that I've kind of done as I've come in here. I think we will get to a point. One of the tricky pieces really there is to who do we compare ourselves to? And I know there have been a different lists of districts at different sizes with different demographic makeups. Maybe they're doing letters, maybe they're not. Maybe literacy isn't a priority for them. So it's really trying to find a good group of districts that are good and comparable for us. And I think once we do that, we can more easily do more comparisons as we get there. But initially, it's been really a kind of a time constraint of like, where do we focus our efforts, and we're really looking internally first.
So I'd suggest just on that point, we should be a 1, just because if we're not, number 2 says that we are looking at other districts, and we're not yet doing that, right? So
Let's see, number 2 says the district is developing the ability to determine which cost savings options successfully used by other districts merit further exploration.
so if we don't know.
So we're developing it, but you're right.
But we
I mean,
don't
it's
know,
probably,
maybe it's nitpicky. I just feel like
right,
true honesty, I think we're a 1.
okay.
I do think where you've started is the right move, though. Right, because if we were to just say, oh, well, this district spends this much, it doesn't actually help us make cuts or expansions or whatever.
Right.
So I think that kind of internal understanding is more important. Sorry.
Yeah.
For me, and maybe this is kind of a summary conversation about why I think that being part of a group could be potentially helpful, is that it seems like benchmarking against aspirational districts, especially on financial matters, can be incredibly helpful in helping districts become more efficient and effective. So I think this is a real linchpin piece and an area we need to focus on.
Okay. Anything else? York? I'm sorry, Dare.
I just want to reiterate, too, what I said in an earlier meeting, and that is that what we tend to do with our cuts is we look at people who are retiring or resigning and determining if that position is needed. And I think that the approach we need to take is looking at all of our positions to see what is needed, regardless of who's resigning or retiring, and using other districts as a model of where potentially we could, make some cuts would be a good thing. So I just want to put that out there again.
Right. I appreciate that. And I think as we get into looking at our next agenda item when we get there about administration, it'll be really interesting to start looking at how some other districts our size are configured at the district office level. And I think that will provide us some good data and detail for us to look at.
And one of the reasons that I'm really comfortable with this being on the low end of the scale is that the whole idea of comparing to other districts is a very complex idea. There's so many pieces that talk about how a district operates, from their size to their configuration to their funding sources to the demography. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is a complex piece, and you can't just say, oh, they're about the same as us. It's hard to find them. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. In the same category of paying for priorities, the ability to collect information and execute analysis to determine the potential savings, impact on students, ease of implementation, and collect stakeholder feedback for the prioritized cost-saving options. So I feel like we have the ability to do that. I actually rated this a 3, which probably somewhere in the 2.5 to 3. In that I think really tying together potential cost savings, impact on students is a critical component to this when we're identifying any cost savings possibilities. The ease of implementation, and we talked about collecting stakeholder feedback for the prioritized and savings options. These are areas that we still need to work on, and we're moving in that direction. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds right. And as we've talked about a lot of these different slides, one thing that keeps coming to my mind, and something else maybe we're going to get to, is when I think about cost savings, it's not always just cuts. It's also efficiencies. And I think across the board, I question if we yet have the people that have the technology expertise for automation, implementation of AI, that sort of stuff, where we can take the finances to the next century in terms of automating that sort of stuff. And maybe as we think about this capacity for cost savings, a lot of that can come in time from automation. And is that something we think about in terms of having the right people in place or partners in place?
Right.
I don't know if we do.
No, that's a good point. And so that'll be part of my ongoing assessment as we move forward, and really finding out what options there are available for some of those automations. Celeste?
I also wonder about basically, the impact on students piece, how we measure that. I feel like sometimes it was vastly improved this year in the presentation of cuts. Last year, I felt like I got most of my impact of students' information from emails, but that there wasn't sufficient time in the presentation of potential cuts to get any community feedback. So basically, that we the board got information 1 week prior to the cuts being presented to the board, but then we voted on that Tuesday. And so I think that kind of goes back to process, of
Right.
the process of how things are done. So one is the ability to collect the information and for board members to really understand the impact of every cut, but then also back to having a long enough timeline for the entire budget process for everyone to really be on board.
Right, and it can be challenging to measure the impact of a reduction on students. And so really coming up with that formula is something I'm also working on to see, okay, when we reduce an MTSS position, like how do I measure that impact on students? And I think as simple as, is it a direct relation to students or is it indirect? And so that's one, so kind of developing that rubric for grading those kind of things is something that I'm working on.
One idea I have is it must be really hard as a board to hear the public comments and then be able to judge, like, okay, how many people does this person represent? So maybe as a district, we could almost like just take that feedback and spend some more time. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Spend some more time with it to think about what is that constituency, how large are they, how much of an impact is this having? Because I do think that it's just natural as humans to to go to ease of implementation for anything, really. And so I'm not saying that's what we're doing with our cuts is doing the easiest, but it just must be really difficult. So somehow determine, and I don't know what that process looks like, but maybe that's something we could do better. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, as a board member, it is extremely difficult, and what would be more helpful is having actual effectiveness data so you understand constituent perspective, but it's not he said, she said, you know what I mean? Or like we had some guardrails and norms, like, you know, these certain programs are really foundational to student success, like, I don't know, music, arts, PE, like a whole rounded child. Plus, so we need to, I think if we had clear guardrails, and then also when we were making decisions, we knew, okay, this program is really effective, then I would feel confident. And I do think that you've hit the nail on the head. Like, I don't like making decisions where it's based on emotion of,
Of a couple public comments.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, yes.
Well, and actually, that just makes me think if we have our priorities real straight, then we could prioritize where we're going to spend. Because the other thing, this is reductions. We also should be investing in our priority areas. So,
Yeah,
like right now in high school, we have a 30-to-1, and the expectation is everybody's 30-to-1. Well, if we're really investing in literacy and math, then those classes, maybe we have more staffing, and then other classes, and maybe that even needs to speak to the contract language. If we were all on the same page, I'm sure the teachers would, you know, work with us if we were just more clear. It's just
and you know, despite the fact that we're a community-funded district, the LCFF that links to our LCAP does exactly that. The intent is to say there are more severe needs, and that, you know, you get more money for students that fit that criteria than others, and that's one of the things that makes things a little difficult to find the right mixture. But I think you're absolutely right. Figuring out where money gets spent is it has to be more than ease of implementation. It should talk about what's the most important need. Yeah.
I'm going to continue a little bit of a tangent. I think that actually is the LCAP is where we need to start investing and trying, like our, what do they call it at every school? Test of change, measure of change?
Small test of change, yeah.
To try to measure effectiveness. Because every year LCAP gets reassigned to different buckets, but there's never conversation about how those students were served or data related to it. But that's a smaller thing than our entire budget to try to figure out how do we measure effectiveness.
I love that, because I have also heard that basically as districts start to connect effectiveness and spending, that it is very helpful to choose a couple smaller buckets as, I mean, basically, I reiterate everything you say.
I would agree too. I think the LCAP is a document that gives us goals and actions that are measurable. And in our conversation yesterday at our management meeting, I've been trying to get, as principals are all working on their single plans for student achievement, SIPSAs, it's really aligning, because they're setting goals there and their budgets are kind of there. And then we have LCAP, and then we put it all together in one big budget. But I think all of that needs to be aligned. And I think it needs to be aligned around the goals, the district goals, because that's where a lot of the meat of the priorities are existing in those documents. And so how those documents are prepared, what kind of input is part of that is important to know.
I want to just take a minute on timing. We're about halfway through our agenda, and there's quite a few more slides here. Are we okay continuing with this? I know we wanted to bring the GNA back when you were here. Can I get some input from the committee about how to proceed with the timing?
Just question, how much longer you think it would be to finish?
Well, we have, I think, 4 more questions.
Yeah.
And then we can say, let's go till 5:30 with this, and so that'll make sure we've got a good solid half hour for GNA.
Yeah, so my question is, can we have a little time for like a overall discussion instead of each
If
piece
you
as
wanna
well?
move-
Like, can we, because I know that staff recommended we don't use this tool or this group going forward, but what is the plan? I would like to at least have a little time to discuss, given these results, what are we going to do?
That sounds great. I think we should
Yeah, that's fine.
go over the
Pivot.
last few questions in about 4 minutes and then try to have a
Okay.
summary
Yeah,
conversation.
okay. 3C.
So C is, this question, let's see, is about the communication tools and communication tools and processes that'll allow us to get some of this work done. I feel like those tools exist and the processes exist, but I think we can improve on implementing them. So with that, does anybody disagree? Anybody have any thoughts? We can move.
Where did you land on that one?
I landed as I actually ranked this a 4, only because the tools and processes exist. We have the capacity to do it. Now, we've talked about in other questions, improving using those tools. And so maybe this was more a 3.5 or a 3 based on the actual execution of it.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep that capacity word in mind as we're doing this. It doesn't necessarily mean we're implementing or doing that. Good.
Okay, and then, and this section is about actually implementing the plan. And this first one, leaders can collaborate to make tough budget trade-off decisions. And let's see, with this one, I ranked this a 3 because we do collaborate, but I think kind of what Dare has talked about, I think there's room for improvement in that communication collaboration to make these budget trade-off decisions, to really focus in on the budget trade-off. So I need to work on a format that will accommodate those trade-off conversations. Moving on. And you can stop me at any point if you want to address any of these. This is to produce a budget document that clearly shows resources devoted to instructional priorities and resources shifted for priorities based on consideration of cost effectiveness. And this one I ranked a 2 because I think while we do have a pretty good budget document, I think as we shift toward these priorities and documenting what these priorities are and how the money is spent, that budget document will need to be improved to report on that. Instead of a 200-page document of state forms and narrative on the district as a whole, I think getting into some of those, as we set the priorities, how is it going with those priorities? Almost as like a performance document.
I just have a question. Would it be, like, is it possible to do the budget that way? Or do you have to do the budget the way it is because of state guidelines? And so this means more work for you?
So there's 2 parts to that. So the state requires we do the budget a certain way. But as we work on the data and how transactions are coded and how things are set up, we should be able to get to that point relatively easily. And it wouldn't be more work. But once we set the priorities, then we set the account coding for those priorities and train everybody out there to say, for this priority, use this, for this. Then once the data goes in well, extracting it's not a problem. Did you have any, was that accurate? Was that good? Okay.
I would say that this is a key piece because, and I don't know if it would be a 1 or a 2, but basically, like, as a board member, I still don't know how many CTE programs we have or how much they cost. Or I know our staff has increased since we received ESSER funds, but I don't know in what areas. I haven't seen a staffing analysis yet. So right now, I'm still not clear on how we're spending our money, and I think that is a huge
Right.
opportunity. Well, I would say, like, as a board member who has the fiduciary duty to oversee spending, that's a major problem for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I can address that because there are so many programs. If I tried to put them all in the book at one time, it would be so overwhelming. There's it would just be too much. So maybe periodic updates on specific programs, so where we just focus on one or two at a time, may be a good way to do it.
Well, I wonder about, I mean, I feel like we should be able to produce a document that has every single one of our programs, the cost of the program, the number of kids served, and that basically, like, once we do that once, it would be a lot of work to do initially, but then we just repopulate it. And because I think seeing periodic data is not the same thing as understanding the entire picture of our spending. And knowing 85% of our budget is on staff is just not sufficient. So, yes.
Okay, so no, I appreciate that, and I will start thinking about how to produce that. I just, the budget document will become so many pages with all the programs, but I think it's important to at least have it there as a reference.
And it could also be, I mean, I know districts have like a budget document and then a financial transparency document. I mean, it could be done in a really user-friendly way, and have one document that checks the compliance boxes and then one that is
Right.
easily
Yeah,
understandable.
I think that's something we can work toward. Okay, moving on, 4B, to produce, let's see. Code shows resources, we just did that one, right? Yeah. The next one, to produce a strategic finance plan that includes effective implementation of instructional priorities, identification of resources added and cost-saving options for the next 3 to 5 years. And I think that is something we need to work on. I think that is something, the detail needs to be done. And I think this is work that'll take some time, establishing the priorities, getting the coding correct so we can produce these documents. And it's a high priority for me to start working toward that. But we don't have a strategic financial plan yet that's documented of here's our direction. So I think that's the first step. And then we can start reporting on cost savings, 3 to 5 year plan, all of those things would follow.
Do you see an inherent linkage between a strategic financial plan and an overall district strategic plan? Are they different things? Are they?
I think a strategic plan may not have the budget dollar amounts tied to it. And I think the strategic financial plan is pretty much the strategic plan with dollars attached to it. That's kind of how I see it. And to give multiple years out.
Okay.
I would argue we need a strategic plan first. And I think that I almost don't even want to say that.
I guess to Trustee Banning's point, I think that they really need to be integrated because, like, we do need a strategic plan, but we don't have infinite money. So having the dollar conversation as we have the plan of our priorities makes total sense to me, I think.
And I think the most important word that you in that sentence is priorities, and because that's what the strategic plan helps with. Not only we can have grand visions about every program and everything we want, but ultimately we're going to have to go, okay, where are we going to take the first bite? And I think that's where a strategic plan can come in play.
Right, and I think the challenge with that is you could have a strategic plan goal. We want all kids reading at grade level, by 4th grade. And so how do we tie the financial plan to that? That's where you get into the more detailed priorities of how we'll get there. And so that's tying that all together. Yeah.
I'm still reflecting on Celeste's comments about the staffing and about how much programs cost, because I think really there's only 15 schools, right? Something like that. How many?
18?
18. I should know that. There's 18 schools. Many of them are elementary schools, really basic funding formulas, really basic, like to understand that. My high school, I think I get $750,000 or $800,000 total site funds. It's 5 accounts. It's pretty basic. I think, and actually this just makes me think maybe more people just need to look at this to understand what's really going on, because we also have a section staffing sheet that we get from HR shows how many teachers each high school gets and why, the junior highs, what the assumptions are. Because really most programs, like CTE programs, we pay for staffing and they're just like any other class. And it's really up to individual teachers to get their CTIG funds and their budget together, and then they buy stuff for their program. Might be field trips or some combination of, experiences, materials. But it's actually pretty simple, and you're right, that makes up 85% of our budget. So it should be pretty simple to understand, and maybe, I don't know, maybe one step with all of this is just having more transparency so everyone understands it, and then if we align it with our strategic plan, with our principles, like, I don't know, don't want to make any of this sound simple, but
No, I'm with you.
we're not LA Unified with 2,500 schools. We've got 18 schools. It's pretty simple to understand that.
Right.
I think that is a great point, and even presenting the information, so we have every school, what are all of the programs at the school, how are they staffed? I mean, just breaking it up by school, I don't think would be that difficult to do, but would be hugely helpful. And then also like a staffing formula, like staffing formulas that are very clear, because in the past, I know we have made cuts like across the board, but perhaps we could have a staffing formula like this number of students at this elementary school aren't reading at grade level, they need additional support. You know what I mean? So really clear, like need-based staffing formulas and an understanding of, I mean, I really like your idea of having each school kind of funding and programs being really clear to everybody. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So the last section is to ensure sustainability. And that's basically, once you're on board, can you keep the train rolling? Can you keep working toward that sustainability and prioritize, your goals and cost-saving measures in good times and in bad for, during the budget times, I should say, good times and bad. So there's only one question in this section, and that the staff and systems can support effective implementation of these priorities and cost-saving options, gather data, implement, quality that enables timely adjustment. So basically, once we get this all set up, keeping it set up and adjusting to it and growing with it and really moving forward with it, setting up a model that can be carried on for years to come. Whether we have changes at district and administrators or principals at schools, all those things, it can just be handed on from school to school, from administrator to administrator.
What was your ranking on that?
5A. Is that it? I have that as a 3 because not really knowing when, until we get it set up and what that will entail. I think that is something we've started the process, but really getting there, getting those instructional priorities. We don't yet have the data based on the priorities because we don't really have the priorities documented yet. So an area to be worked on. And as we get to the end of this, I do want to really make, clear that the budget process that we have in place, Lacey and staff work very hard to do what we're doing. And this is no reflection on the work that they've done. I think it's just, we want to grow. And I think we want, more accountability for all of us as a district, with administration and the decisions we make. But they are ready for this to work with us, and as we make the changes, they are absolutely ready to work for us. But I did want to make sure I recognized all the hard work Lacey does to pull all this together every time we do a budget. So thank you, Lacey. That was the last question. York?
Absolutely. I think all of the kind of areas of growth to me come from not your department. I think that it's implementation and communication and working with the folks who are impacted in implementing things,
Right.
which is rarely the finance department's role, or has been. And so when I think about, this conversation and how we try to move forward, I think it's about kind of, not for us, but either for the board or the board directing cabinet to kind of identify the subcategories for priorities, and then figuring out what implementation support programs are in place already, and then trying to figure out how effective they are. And I think that's where we need a lot more input and conversation from sites, from principals, from teachers, from students, from families. But that seems to me a long-term goals
Right.
of ways to do that.
I appreciate that. And I think I like the idea of kind of leading this from a budgetary standpoint, but really all of us are in this together. It's not our department saying you must do this. It's like, hey, let's work and compile this. So where my recommendation to the board was not initially to participate in their alliance, we've gotten a lot out of going through this exercise and really making clear some of the steps we need to take. Not joining the alliance at this time, and we'll see how our progress goes toward moving forward with these. And if we feel like maybe we need that extra support, that extra step, maybe we look at that down the road as we're making improvements if we really want to dig in. Okay?
So my question really is, and I'm not wedded to this alliance, but a group that is focused on this type of change, because I do feel like I really appreciate that you did the diagnostic test, and I feel like you fairly graded the district. And there are areas where we need to focus on. And so my question is really, just as, with PLCs, there are PLC best practices and people go to conferences to learn how to do that. I guess, what is the downside of being part of a thought, like a group of thought leaders who are all working on something similar, so you have support? And it doesn't have to be this one. There are several out there, but what I like about this diagnostic test is it has a very clear path forward and gives us concrete steps of how do we transition, so that, I think we heard from everyone, we really want to align priorities with our funding, make it super clear. But how do we actually get there? And I think it takes some big changes. So I'm wondering, why not be part of a group that has done this multiple times, where other districts are going through similar things, where we can get outside expertise? What is the downside?
I don't necessarily see a downside, but I think we can do it without joining a group, is my initial thought. I feel like I have confidence in the people that I work with, the people here, our community, to really move this in the right direction. There's not a downside to joining a group, other than the requirements for participation and travel and time to make sure to satisfy the requirement for this particular organization. So I'm open to looking at different resources to see where that goes. But I'm confident in our ability as a district to move forward with some of these concepts to get there without necessarily having to be part of an official alliance or group. That's my thought.
I see the downside as only being y'all's time, effort, and energy being used in that, which could produce great results. But I think, to echo what Conrad's saying, if your department can do this and we can see progress in the next few months, then let's not try to add more to your plate. I think one of the things that, as I think about this committee, our role is to make recommendations to the board. If we are looking to make changes and additional work for the finance department, then there should be some sort of, so what do they take off of their plate, right? It can't just be more. Right. It needs to be reasonable, but also actionable, because we do want to see some change. And so in hearing that, I want to support you in however we can in doing the work the way that makes the most sense to the folks doing it every day.
Right, and I would like to take a shot at it and to see what kind of progress we can make in the next couple months, and maybe that at that point will determine that this may be the right thing for us. For me to get everybody else on board, I need to, get them into some group to where we spend time on it. So, with that, I'd like to kind of move on if we can. Make sure we
Yeah,
have-
I just want to
Yeah.
make a couple of general comments. First of all, I really appreciate the engagement in this conversation, and I know that there's probably different perspectives and priorities at this table about what the next steps are going to be. I heard some really strong support for the work of the department and the capacity of the department to do better today. I think we all agreed with that, to do better by in this result, not saying there's a problem, you're learning, you're doing that type of thing. I just want to state that today's discussion is really about understanding and alignment. And what I heard more than anything else is that we've got a lot of capacity in this district, and I keep looking at what is that capacity acting on? And it just continues to give me more and more attention toward the need for a strategic plan that deals with what our instructional priorities and the ways we're going to be doing things. Because I have a sense that if we had that in a better place, that it would be pretty easy to do what these next steps of linking these things together are. I did realize today, as I was preparing for this and just thinking through things, that I know very little about GFOA and the diagnostic, and I spent a little time around it. And one of the things I discovered, it's a highly regarded organization, but it's one that is very broad in its representation into county and other types of government agencies. As a matter of fact, they don't have a list of their members, but through digging a little bit, you can figure out that primarily the districts that are using this partnership, if you will, tend to be very large, complex districts. LA Unified, I had a couple of names that I don't remember. LA was one, but I think districts of our size at 11,000, that's large in this area. But in the grand scheme of statewide and such, 11,000 is a pretty moderately small type of district. So, and one of them they referred to as districts that are CBO headed. And I think that's what we are. We have a chief business officer that heads the whole finance department. So I'm not sure, I would want us, before you make a commitment, to say this is the right one or not. I think your approach is exactly right. Let's see what you can learn. Let's see what you can accomplish. This kind of thing is designed to have areas of growth, and I think you've taken a really appropriate response. It's clear that we have a number of established practices in place that along with some areas that could be strengthened if we choose to invest additional time and resources. The question is not whether improvements is possible, it always is. But how do we prioritize the work in a way that's aligned with our capacity and core goals? And I'm not sure we really, other than 4 priorities, understand what the core goals are. So I'm going to keep coming back to the strategic plan environment is way bigger than what we're dealing with here. And this was a great opportunity to address things.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So, just Conrad, so when you are done with this, and you adjust any scores that we just went through, do you then turn it in and then they give you back feedback? Or is
No.
this more like a self-assessment without any sort of feedback from them?
No, it's a self-assessment. It's even titled a self-assessment
Okay.
tool to kind of determine, can you do it or can you not?
Thank you.
So,
So I would say I am totally supportive of what you say in developing the priorities into much clearer goals. One question I have with this diagnostic tool in particular as the Finance Committee is whether, and I hear what you're saying, that you think that this has been a helpful exercise, and I really appreciate that. But could we come back in 6 months and say, look at the self-assessment again and say, where have we made progress and where else might we need more support, just so we have, what I like about this is it gives us a plan, You know what I mean? And perhaps you decide which pieces you want to prioritize first, but in 6 months we could say, okay, we've made some progress here. And here is where we need to continue to look. Here is where we might need support at this point, or no, we have done our own research and we've realized we have the capacity here.
And I'm going to finish up with one more comment, which is that we could take any one of those areas that we talked about, or any one of the ideas that got presented at the table today, and say that should be something that we can accomplish. That's not impossible. It's not hard to do. What is hard to do is to take all the things that are not hard to do and figure out which ones you need to do first, and sequencing. So again, I've said this multiple times. I'm going to stop now. Priorities and sequencing is really what we have to do. And I think we made some really good progress with this today. I want to thank you all for that participation.
I guess I'm just asking particularly on finance. I understand, I feel like we can do 2 tracks, and I hear you that they need priorities in order to make a strategic financial plan, but are there things that we can work on right now? Like in the
I
next
think we heard there
year?
are.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we
So I
have the
guess the
numbers.
question is, like, in 6 months, can we bring this back to the Finance Committee? Can we, or I guess, does that need to be a vote for a future
Well,
item? I don't know how that works.
I'd like to ask what Conrad feels is the appropriate timeline for doing that, and is it coming back with all of the things again, or is it targeting something that you want to start with and bringing that back?
And he doesn't have to say today, perhaps.
Right. Oh, I think the process starts with strategic planning, which is beyond the scope of this committee necessarily. And so as we get down that road, we'll have a better idea of how. Let's table that, but I think it's not a bad idea for 6 months to have an update. I'm not against that.
Okay.
I just want to add one thought. Throughout this whole discussion, it just seems so apparent to me how intertwined fiscal and non-fiscal matters are.
Yeah.
Right? And what I love about what you've done, Conrad, is you've gone to the sites and talked to people face to face and given them that opportunity, good, bad, ugly, allowed them to share with you. I think if we, as a district, committed to doing that up and down our departments, and that the sites would then feel, they would feel more listened to, but they'd also be more part of the solution, and then the teachers would feel more listened to, feel more part of the solution. It just would be good up and down, HR, facilities, and some of those people have come out and talked to us, but to do like a listening tour, even with all of them, it's just thinking out loud.
Right. No, I appreciate that. That's planned to keep going. I don't plan to just stop. And
Well-
so, but it's about other departments as well.
Well, we almost got to
And
the
I'll
next
just
item
appreciate-
with the half an hour.
Sorry. I'll just appreciate you deciding to do that on your own and not being directed or asked to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Means a lot. Thanks, Joe.
We ready to take
Yeah.
on the next item and
Can we
get
do
through
the-
as much as we can?
Can we do the minutes? Can we just do? a quick
What's
vote?
our tolerance for sticking around a little while?
The only thing is we have a 6 o'clock Avid celebration at Santa Barbara Junior High. I can be a few minutes late to that.
Okay. Can we give it an additional 15? That'll get the half hour that we asked for. Is that all right?
Lacey will need to go
Okay.
pick up her daughter.
Well, let's get started.
Okay. So can we do approve the minutes real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Since we have-
Celeste, we didn't we had a quorum, but we didn't have a quorum of people that were at the last meeting, so we're going to hold off on the minutes until you were here. So, I guess I can ask for a motion at this point.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
And I just wanted to make a comment about the minutes from I believe, the last board meeting. We've had some conversations about what minutes should look like. And so we are going to do some training among our admin assistants and people that take the minutes to make sure with our legal counsel that everything that should be in the minutes are in the minutes. And so that's yet to come.
And that they're kind of looking like the same thing from each committee
Right.
and each group.
All of our
Okay.
committees will
Yeah.
look the same.
You ready
So-
to vote?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We had first motion and second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? We're done.
Right. Well, thank you.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, and we'll move on to the G&A cost analysis, and I won't spend too much. These are slides that were in the last presentation, and I linked Todd's presentation as well before, and so I think we get to the point, and so basically how this works is I broke the general administrative costs down by the functional area: board, superintendent, public info, external financial audit, other G&A, indirect costs, and central ETS. Oh, I'm looking at my screen, sorry. Got behind. And so the reason I did it this way is so we can identify which of those functional areas are the more big ticket items, which are areas that we can focus in on to maybe do some additional analysis and additional work. Because I know in my experience and all the years I've been doing school district budget work is any time in budget, tough times, they want to look at administration and are we top heavy and can we make cuts there, and it's a reasonable ask. And so from that detail, the big ticket items become centralized data processing. This is our ETS department. Other general administration is a combination of a number of departments, which we will get into.
Hey,
yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if you go back, how can I must be missing something. It says communications public info 4,500,
So,
but don't we have a communications dude?
right, that was, I believe, he was rolled into the superintendent's budget, Ed? Communications, where did?
The communications piece is mostly just the like advertising, services. It's more like supplies and services budget that gets categorized separately. The actual position is in other general admin.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe that has moved, like it was here at one time and has been moved. And we tried, it moves around. And so I think settling on where the things should be is an important first step for all of us. So you can see board. I will mention one thing about board is in years of election, you'll see it jump up, and then when a non-election year, it'll come down. So you'll see some of those areas where it's gone up. And so in my overall analysis, it's really other general administration and centralized data processing are probably the areas of growth. I don't know if we can get into, and what I've provided this evening was kind of a deeper dive, and we can dive into any of these, and I think we will need to because there may be some from each of these areas that we want to look at. But this other general administration tab, I broke it down into the salaries, benefits, books and supplies, service and operating, and capital outlay. These are the account categories that make all that up. I know it's a lot of numbers, but I figured it's good to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of what's happened, and then the budget of where we are now, and we're working on developing the budget for next year. And I'll get through, maybe I'll get through some of the slides, and then we can kind of have the conversation after that. And so this, I added these. This is new from the last times that we've talked about other G&A. So this is 4 years. This is all other general administration. The detail of what makes up those accounts. And so what you see is the account code on the far left, we call it the SACS code, state account code structure. You can see the description. In this case, you'll see most of this is positions, what department they're in, and 4 years of financial data. And so I think this is a good way to look at these areas as as a first step into determining which are the big buckets that should really be looked at. I think the other thing I might have added, and I can provide via email and post, is org charts for each of the departments involved, because I believe it's our business services department, human resources, and communications, and I think that's pretty much it, right? So in going through this, you can see a lot of the positions. Some positions are lumped together in one account. Like you'll see a lot of the accounting technicians and kind of admin support. They're all lumped together in one account. You see general counsel was added this year. Some of the management positions are lumped together. But basically, and then we get into some of the other accounts where, you know, there may not have been anything last year, but there was some activity the years prior, stipends, overtime. And then so the total salaries are across the bottom there, or in the middle. And I just kind of rolled all the employee benefits into one line because there's a ton of lines for that. But that includes PERS and STIRS, retirement, FICA, Medicare, all of those statutory benefits that are included as part of salaries and benefits. And then we get into the non-salaried items, which are, for the most part, smaller amounts, office supplies, tech supplies, snacks and things like that, equipment. There's not a lot there. But the one I really wanted to point out here is you can see our property and liability insurance, where in 22-23 was just about 1.9 million, is up to 3.3 million in 4 years. And I have some concerns about that, and so I have some questions to ask CISC about that. We're about to receive the estimate for next year, and if it keeps growing at that rate, I really want to start looking to see why, and are there other options for our property and liability insurance. But that's a pretty significant increase in just 4 years. I think it's almost $500,000 a year is what it's been going up, which is crazy. It can. And so what can happen is we're part of the school's risk pool. And so when you're part of a pool, if one district, the experience can be spread across all members of the pool. Yeah. So there's some benefits, protections of being part of a pool, and there's also some risk of, and our health benefits were part of a pool as well. And so that kind of works the same way. Yeah, Celeste.
Can we also do anything preventatively, like improving any of our processes or security, or I don't know, like ways, like do we talk to the insurer and find out like we have a lot of payouts in these areas? This is how we could reduce our potential liability?
I think those are very good questions, and I plan to do that. On the amount for last year, I saw an experience charge of $600,000 was kind of built into our new rate. And I don't know that we had that many in settlements or claims. This is like property, cars, buildings, those kind of things. I don't remember anything huge happening that would cause that, but being part of the pool, they just kind of apply some of those things across the pool. So
a charge like that isn't reflective necessarily of something that happened here.
Not entirely.
Because of the pool, yeah.
That's my assumption, but I think Celeste is right.
Good,
I need to
good
start
to know.
asking those questions sooner than later as to, and I think when I get the new estimate for next year, that'll be a good opportunity for me to pick up the phone and say, hey, walk me through this, help me understand why this keeps going up so much. That's crazy. So that was one line item that really jumped out. You'll see contracted services. I mean, all of these are different accounts to look at in the detail of, and hopefully things like legal expense, we should see decrease dramatically with Joanna being here now, which really seems to be working very well. Not too many big ticket items here. But overall, you see the annual total from 8.1 million to 11.3 million. And this was something that Todd had identified on his initial analysis, which really was a good result as far as this is an area we need to look at. And keep in mind that from 24-25 to 25, from 23-24, 24-25, 25-26, there was a 15% negotiated increase that not only affected administrators, it affected all of the employees that work in these departments, ETS, our fiscal department, our purchasing, payroll, like everybody involved. And so that was kind of a big shock to the entire system across the board. And so it's trying to wrangle that in. So I'm hoping from 25-26 to 26-27 that we should not see that kind of increase as we're developing the budget. Okay. So that's kind of what I put together for other GNA, and I think this is probably not the last step in this. I think there'll probably some conversation, areas to look, things to then move forward and try to accomplish. You'll see the bulk of the cost here is in salaries and benefits. Outside of professional liability insurance, a lot of it is really focused on positions. And that's something that as a cabinet, as administration, we are really looking at. Department reorganizations when necessary. I think it's been mentioned more than once. Don't just wait till someone retires or leaves to determine if a position is needed, but we need to really get to really doing some self diagnosis or looking at our departments individually to see what we can do. Can we do more with less? Because we really need to take a look. All the cuts that need to be made can't necessarily come from here, but this, hopefully we can get through here and find some ways. So with that.
And ideally, I think as what we've been talking about is as we start to look at these G&A expenses, we can't really look at them in isolation because we have to do what we've been talking about. We have to look about how does this affect our core work. This is just as much as anything else part of a strategic financial plan. This is just one pot of where we're doing that.
Right. And I will, just in defense of administration, because I'm part of it, we are part of a pretty significant state bureaucracy. Like I'll say CTE in and of itself, the reporting requirements, all the filings that there's a lot of that happen staff here. And so, not that couldn't be distributed elsewhere, but I'm just saying there's a lot of bureaucracy and things that have to LCAP in and of itself. But can we run more efficiently, run leaner? I think that's something that I need to look at. And I need to work with my cabinet members to really understand, can we do more with less and become more efficient and be better. So any thoughts, questions?
So Conrad, I know you identified, I believe the number was 6 million of cuts in your forecast. Right. Is any of that coming out of these buckets?
Yes, there are, like from this department, I think there were, oh gosh, I wish I had it in front of me. I think that's a good question, but it's less than $1 million, okay. I would say. Okay.
So my reaction, again, I love all this detail. It's exactly what I think we all want and look at. So thank you so much for putting it together. I've done some work on this. I think maybe some things we could add to this. Mm-hmm. One is just a concept of what's happened with inflation over these 7 years. And just to get to the punchline, I've already done it. So core inflation has grown over these 7 years at a 3.8% per year compound annual growth rate. And then headline inflation, so inclusive of oil and food and stuff that moves around crazy, that's at 4.1. So I thought if we could look at our growth rates of these expenses and where are these different buckets growing well in advance of inflation, because that is, you can't explain away. You say if something's going up by inflation, that's reasonable. But if something's going up 2x, 3x, 4x inflation, maybe there's something going on, particularly considering our constituents that we serve as a district, there's 11% less, mm-hmm. right? And so I did that and I went through and I said, well, for each of these expense line items, if they grew from 2020 to 26 by inflation, what would that expense be? And how does that compare to our current expenses? And I'm seeing sometimes we're overspending by $1 to $2 million versus just inflation. So that's just a showing where the expenditures have far exceeded inflation. And for me, that was a good way for me to really zone in on maybe where there might be something else going on. Could be as simple as what you highlighted in this insurance. Insurance is going up everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so that makes sense. But so some numbers that stood out to me when I looked at this, in terms of the big numbers, so business services, and this might actually be the insurance, but that's up 81%. So that's a 10.4% CAGR versus 3.8% inflation. So if we just got that back to just the inflation grown number, that would be a savings of 1.9 million. So that's maybe a framework that we can look at this to try and figure out which different line items are growing faster than inflation, and then say, is there something underlying it that is driving it, maybe like the insurance, or maybe there's some other thing going on to help us just be a little bit smarter in terms of, not smarter, but just helping us highlight what stands out. I mean, see, like the superintendent's office, their spending is up 300%, so that's a 26% CAGR. It's not a big number, so that's like a 396,000 savings. Purchasing and warehouse is up 60%, so that's an 8.2% CAGR. Human resources is up 72%, that's a 9.4% CAGR. Versus like the 3.8% inflation. So I would just put that out as, you know, something for the committee as a framework suggestion to add in terms of how we can compare the growth in these expenses relative just to inflation. Because again, we can't expect the expenses to grow less than inflation. It'd be great if we could find ways. But if it's growing 2 to 3x inflation, there could be something going on there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I'm back up again. I also, because as I think about some of those specific things, I'm like, human resources, 70% over this year's, and then like even compared to last year, 350 grand. Like, I don't understand that at all, and I don't know that it's our role to understand that, or maybe just to have people look into that. But I don't think our HR department is $350,000 different this year than last year, even with the raises and all that. And then business services, I'd be interested what's in there. Is that where the insurance is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that might be that one. But I really like what Todd said. There's some obvious ones that maybe we could look into more and see like what is going on, so that if it's a necessary thing, let's tell people about it, and then it'll help with the understanding of the budget, because there's not that many pots of money.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Interesting data, and I think if we want to dig deeper into it, you've given us some things that really make sense to be where we start.
Sorry, which page is warehouse on, and purchasing? Do we actually have a warehouse?
So we do have a warehouse. It doesn't operate like it used to. It's not like a Office Max anymore. Basically, the warehouse was moved over to nutrition services, and the bulk of what's in there is food. And so that staff does delivery of the mail. It's run by food services now, because we don't have office supplies as much anymore. It's not a store like it used to be.
But even like, I'd say like the superintendent's office, spending up 300% in 6 years. So from 144,000 to now spending 578,000. It's 26% CAGR. So even if we just got back to just inflation growth, we could shave $400,000 right there.
I think it would be important to understand what caused that. One of the things we heard earlier is, well, that used to be there and we moved it here and that kind of thing. So, but if it's up over everywhere else, it looks big in that area. Does that mean there's another area where it's actually less because we moved something out of it to put it into the superintendent's realm?
And to me, that's a big part of what this committee is about.
Yeah.
Ask those questions, because they're good questions to ask, and then we can provide the answers or some response as to what's in there. And then we can make recommendations to determine, is this something the board should take action on and say, hey, why are we doing it this way? This is somewhere that needs to be reduced.
Yeah.
I
Do
think
we know why it's 578,000?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know, but
I mean, it did a step change in, I think, 23. It went from 166 up to 461.
So for superintendent,
That's under,
I've seen it decline. From 2020, it was 1.4 million, and the budget for 2026
this
is
is for
1.
code 1000 superintendent's office under, so you go down to the last
so-
page. So it's a breakout.
The breakdown of that?
Yeah. No, keep going down. It's in other, management code breakdown of other general administrative.
Oh, yeah, that's in the spreadsheet.
7,200.
Yeah, that I linked. I didn't put that in a slide, but, let me see.
Would it make sense, maybe, and again, going back to Brown Act, but to make a request of maybe 3 areas where the CBO's office could come back with more specific analysis? 3 areas that are kind of high potential for cost savings. And then we have a target for our next meeting.
I would be fine with that. Just to continue the topic
Yes.
of general administration.
So
we-
it's not overwhelming, but
Yeah,
just
no,
maybe
I-
three,
We took it
three
down
areas?
one level.
Yes.
And now from that, we identify other levels. Maybe if Todd wants to email me specific
It could be after the meeting,
questions
maybe
or-
that's
I
a,
have it here, I could just read them off.
yeah, maybe we, top 3 high
So top three
potential
in terms of
areas.
prospective savings, number 1 is business services. Number 2 is human resources.
Okay,
Number 3 is superintendent's office.
okay.
I'm leaving out like stuff we can't control, if there's any sort of like
Sure.
contractual stuff, right?
Got it.
Todd,
Can you repeat them? I'm sorry.
The top one is business services. The second one is human resources. And then the third one is superintendent's office.
Are
What
the-
about data? I mean, the ETS and data growth has been huge.
Mhm.
I would put that on,
Yes.
but that could be for the following month.
I would like,
But-
I'd like to maybe make
Yes.
that its own separate agenda item.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
then you get into technology, which I think is something this committee should look at
Yeah.
as, and the board should really look at. as,
Todd, I have a question. When you identified that, is that based on percentage growth or dollar amount growth?
So it's both, and they're linked. And so there's some where there's been a real big percentage growth, but the savings, getting it back just to the inflation run rate, is like $20,000.
Right, because it's a small pot to start
But
with.
like the superintendent growth was 300%, and then the savings, getting back just to an inflation growth is almost $400,000.
Okay, all right,
So
that's
like
helpful,
the-
thank
they're-
you.
they're
Yeah.
linked.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay. Come on, Todd. Okay, so I think we have some things to work on, and I guess this will come back at the next meeting with some of those, more detail in those areas that, to look at. So with that, we are over time, but I did want to show one more slide if everybody's
Sure.
okay with that.
I-
We are in the process of our budget development for next year, and I just wanted to let people know that we are, this week, Lacey and I will be meeting with all of our departments, kind of verifying plans, any reorganizations, and I've asked all of our department heads to give me 3 things. What are you doing this year that you're not going to do next year? What are you not doing this year that you're planning to do next year? And then I need some priorities and goals. And I can frame that as educational priority and goals and kind of how does that impact students. So this is some of the things we'll be talking about. Confirm staffing. We're giving them a list of their people, and we want to make sure what we have is right, at the right level. How many FTE are they? Are they in the right place? And so we can confirm that. And all the non-salary stuff to make sure that their budgets, I want to make sure they're not expecting their budgets to grow because we're not in a place where they can. We want to finalize district-wide staffing. Dr. John Becchio has been working with sites. I think they're the only piece he's really still trying to figure out is the staff funded position piece. Like if you have a foundation that's paying for this position, that position, what does that look like? I'm just relaying that message. So,
Yeah, I actually feel like I know what's going on with our staffing for the most part. They're just some other pieces that are
Right.
going on. I feel like I get it. I feel like everyone else should should just could look at those section staffing sheets and
Okay.
see what we've been given and understand what our staffing is and how we have to work with it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And then in May, the governor does a May revise, and I plan to do actually a presentation for the board at the May meeting. I need to make sure Hilda can get me on the agenda for that. I'd like to bring along with that some what I call budget assumptions, basic things that I'm using to say I'm planning to put in 4.5% growth in property tax. Here's the inflation rate we're using, just to kind of get it out there. That's either some of the concepts that we'll be using as we finalize the budget. We get I think we got most of the school site budgets in. I'll be working with Lacey to make sure we get all those in the right place, and her staff. Kathy Pelton is a big role in that. And hopefully get a finalized list of our budget reductions and confirming they're properly a part of the budget for next year. And so our next meeting, I'll report back to this group on a lot of those things.
One question I have is I don't see the board in any part of the budget development process, like setting parameters for the budget. Is that going to be a part of the process this year?
So traditionally, it has not been, as far as I understand, and for this cycle, I think it's something we need to build that in, and I need to figure out the best process for doing that. I think that's why for the May meeting, I plan to bring, like I said, the budget assumptions. If there's something you would like to see a part of that, I mean, I can't get the whole budget done for the May meeting, but I think are there key components.
I guess when I say budget parameters, that would happen before the budget development, like kind of guardrails and.
Right, so that would be a new concept for this district, and I think that's something that we can work toward. All right? I think we're done for now.
Let's call it adjourned at 6:15. Thank you for staying, and thank you for continuing to be part of these discussions. I felt like today was really productive.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, appreciate it. And thank you, Dare, for sticking around, 6:15, appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. We're heading over